Domination, just a good old whooping of Wisconsin. Iowa rolls to the victory. We break it down today. Locked on Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first win of a $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, that was a good one, wasn't it? Iowa with a dominating performance against Wisconsin as they get the win. It was a thing of beauty and maybe something that we've been hoping for, looking for, rooting for throughout the years. It's just a bludgeoning as we see now Iowa. 3 consecutive games at Kinnick Stadium against Big Ten foes, scoring over 40 points. Now, the passing offense is nothing elite, but the run game certainly is. And that's where the conversation starts in this one. Iowa's ability to run the football once again. Of course, it was the emergence in the first career start at Iowa for Brendan Sullivan. Found it interesting him mentioning after the game that he hasn't had a whole lot of chances to not just start a game, but also finish it. The case here, as we know, the backup quarterback situation was incredibly dire. Cade McNamara out with the concussion. Marco Lyonez with the injury that he sustained in practice. He was out. It was walk-on Jackson Stratton, and then emergency quarterback was the other direction that they were going to go. But Iowa didn't need to worry about the backup quarterback as they get the win 42-10. It was the ground game, the big story. The defense played at a high level. So many good things and so many things that you look at. And I know there's going to be the other side, right? The other side of what could have been if Brendan Sullivan would have been installed as a starter from game one, or if we would have saw a quicker hook, if we would have seen him throughout the course of this season, would we be talking about a team that isn't 6-3 and on the outside looking in for the Big Ten championship, for the college football playoff, and with what awaits them in the schedule ahead, where I was going to be favored in every game the remainder of the season. There's a lot of what ifs, but let's just talk about the good. Let's talk about what we saw here tonight and the Iowa victory and just the domination that came out of it against Wisconsin. You start with the ability, obviously, to run the football. Another big performance out of Caleb Johnson. And this was not one of the nights that we've seen throughout the course of this season where for Caleb Johnson, it was really about those big gainers, right? Picking up the 25, 35, 50-yard plays. That's not what this is. But this was a consistent 6, 7, 8 yards a pop. Whenever they needed it, they were able to find it. We have to talk about the offensive line and the way that they just continue to maul up front. It's veteran. This is what we hope we're going to see out of this group, and they've finally taken that step forward. And I think a big answer by George Barnett, taking this group of guys largely the same throughout the years. They got whooped up on early in their career. There were guys playing out of position, guys that really shouldn't have been playing that early in their career, but because of some defections, because of guys that just didn't hit for whatever reason, you're left with what they had to go through, and they were able to figure it out. And they have at a big time level. The run blocking has been immense, and we were able to see it not just with Caleb Johnson. It didn't matter when Kamari Moulton came into the game, Jazion Patterson when he came into the game. Those guys' ability to run the football, and that was great to see. Of course, Brendan Sullivan adding that extra element with his legs, and you saw it multiple times throughout the evening. His ability to tuck it, to create plays, to get a little bit out of nothing, going to be there. He has that ability, and I think opens up this offense anymore. As we see, he's not a great thrower of the football. Accurate, sure, on the short and intermediate things. He's been good at that, and there's nothing that we can knock at this point. Kirk Ferentz mentioned the intentional grounding. All right. I guess we're picking nits at the quarterback position. And I know that there's going to be plenty of people that have their concerns. If we find out this week that Cade McNamara is medically cleared, that Kirk's going to go back once again to the starter from the beginning of the season. Doesn't want to see a Wally Pipp situation, and it's just going to be the guy that earned the job is going to get it back. I can't see it happening. And I know There is history that says that Kirk Ferentz will do just that. But from what we've seen out of the squad, what we've seen really over the last 6 quarters of football with Brendan Sullivan at the helm, you can't go back. You just can't. We'll talk about that more as we get a little bit deeper into this one. On the other side, how about the play of Nick Jackson and Jay Higgins once again? What they were able to do, domination all over the field. And after that debacle in East Lansing against Michigan State, where it was as un-Iowa like defense that we've seen in a really long time. Yes, they've got beat up. They get beat 35-7 by Ohio State more than anything. I think that game was the third quarter and things and the turnovers that led to that one. We saw them a year ago against Penn State, a year ago against Michigan, and it didn't go well against those top level squads. That was different, though. That was against a very average Michigan State team. And it wasn't that Iowa was out of place or that they were out schemed. They're missing tackles all over the field. We don't expect that because that's not what they did. You take that away on what they've done since then. A shutout against Northwestern. The two scores came on a pick six and a punt return late in that football game. And then what they do this week against Wisconsin, just absolutely eye-opening. And outside of that initial drive, that was aided by some crazy penalty. All right. The disconcerting action where Jay Higgins is clapping his hands. You can't do that. You can't. It simulates a snap, and a lot of teams obviously use the slap, and when they're snapping the ball, the clapping of the hands, and so you can't do that. Okay, that's fine. You see it from time to time. The next one for shifting too hard. Oh, what are we doing here? Just hideous, absolutely hideous. But I was able to overcome it, and obviously that was great to see. This team is fun to watch. This team is enjoyable. And we had this conversation a year ago here on Locked On Hawkeyes as we all get locked and loaded for Iowa football, whatever way. You're at Kinnick Stadium, you're on your couch, you're in your lazy boy, you're wherever it is, you're going to the bar, whatever your favorite, taverning it up at a local pub, whatever your favorite place to do it, we'll have our routine, right? And that routine last year, really the last couple of years, there were times where it felt like a chore. And I know I'm not alone in that. And yes, I love watching Iowa football. And I love conversing about Iowa football. It is a number one. I absolutely love it. However, you're sitting here and here we go again, and you're watching and you're just shaking your head. Can't believe that the offense could be as bad as it is and how they're winning these football games as they did over the last couple of seasons. This just whooping up on teams, playing big boy football. This is what Iowa should have been for years. This is what Iowa football should have been last season, even with injuries. And I know injuries happen, and the injuries to the quarterback position changed it. But boy, you see what Iowa can be at this level. You see what happens when you bring in somebody with an offensive background, somebody that has a skill set of putting together a game plan. Look, teams know Iowa's going to run the football. It's not it doesn't take a Bill Parcells to figure out what Iowa's trying to do, right? But they do it in so many different ways. They use eye candy. They get guys going in different ways. And you just see the ability in those small little things and how it actually works and how it can work at a place like Iowa. And it gives you hope for the future as if Kirk Ferentz wants to stick around for a long time. If Kirk Ferentz thinks he's got another 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is, still left in him, that this thing doesn't just have to, well, they had the great schedule this year. They weren't able to do it and it's over. Yes, they have work to do. Yes, they have to go to the portal and they have to bring in players. They have all of that, but it gives me excitement if we see Tim Lester able to go out and get the perfect quarterback for him and his system, what this thing can be. Yeah, he's going to have to pick up a couple offensive linemen. We'll see as Jazzion Patterson and Kamari Moulton, is that enough at the running back spot next year, along with the freshman redshirting this year and Brevin Dahl and Xavier Williams? Is that going to be enough out of the running back group? Can he bring in a dynamic wide receiver to help out? Zach Ortworth, looks like he got a tight end for the future. That's something to be excited about. But overall, boy, a lot of good coming out of this one, and that is great against a Wisconsin team. Let's talk about it. Brendan Sullivan going forward. What more are we going to see out of the Iowa quarterback? And Kirk's not going to do it, right? Kirk's not going to go back to the well and bring back Cade McNamara. We continue Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime, which is why they've created the Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel. The energy shot made just for super fans like us, the fans who are first in the parking lot and the last to leave. We see you. You know what else gives me a bit of Hawkeye fan fuel this week? The big play from the Iowa running game and seeing Caleb Johnson just sprint his way into the end zone. That nice cutback, boom, C parts, and he is in for six. Those are the big moments that we're looking for. 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for a big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why they created the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot. It's here to help you and keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with 5 Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com, ship nationwide. That's 5hourenergy.com. Trent Condon back with you here as we react to the Iowa domination 42-10 over Wisconsin. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day, with you each and every day throughout the course of the week. A busy week upcoming here for you as we got the short week this week with the Friday matchup against UCLA, and we'll continue to break that one down here throughout the week. The big question, Brendan Sullivan. And I saw a lot of people kind of wringing their hands about Kirk Ferentz's comments. We mentioned a little bit earlier about him talking about the intentional grounding and got to make better decisions with that. But his praise was still very good. And the opening statement, he didn't mention Brendan Sullivan by name. He brought up Cade McNamara. It'll be good to get him back. When Kirk said good to get him back, I personally didn't read it as good to get him back as in he'll be installed again as the starter. Now, I could be dead wrong, and we'll find out Tuesday. I would anticipate by that time that Cade McNamara will be medically cleared and he'll be available, and need him at minimum in the backup role because it's a running quarterback. I mean, quarterbacks in general can get hurt at any time, but with somebody like Brendan Sullivan that brings the energy, brings the juice that he does, and lowers his shoulder from time, lowers his head from time to time in the running game, there is always that back in your mind. You have to have the concern if he gets banged up, exactly what's going to happen. But I just don't buy it. I don't buy that Kirk Ferentz is going back now to Cade McNamara. If it goes awry, if it goes sideways, absolutely. We go back to the most recent quarterback controversy, Spencer Petras and Alex Padilla. And Alex Padilla was not great, as we found out. Alex Padilla, though, did some things, I think, at a better level than what we were seeing from Petras. Spencer Petras was so beat up, not just physically, but mentally. And you saw that in so many of his throws. You saw him short arming things. You saw him missing on just some of the simplest passes that a Big Ten quarterback should have no trouble. And I'm sure he has no trouble in practice, but there was a little bit of vapor lock in the head that was happening with him. And I think there was a lot of things that just, you hear about seeing ghosts, right? And I think there was a big part of that with Petras. Padilla came in, did a nice job, got the win against Wisconsin, or Minnesota, excuse me. He did a really good job, but they went to the end of the season. They're down against Nebraska. Petras comes in the second half, and we can still see something very similar to that. And it's a good option to have. I don't understand the angst with Cade McNamara that you just want to throw him out. If we see Sullivan have to leave the game because of an injury or is just ineffective, the people say, no, you can't go back to Cade. No. That's too much. Jackson Stratton was 4 of 17 passing at Colorado State. It's not the guy that you want in there. Marco Lioness is not available for the next couple of weeks at minimum. So don't throw Cade McNamara out. You need that guy. And in the past, we've seen we need that. And if it gets to that point, what would you rather do? Lose to Nebraska with a backup quarterback or have a chance with Cade McNamara going into the game if it would come to that? It's absolutely crazy talk that I continue to hear with McNamara. Sullivan's the guy. And Sullivan has to be the guy. And Kirk Ferentz knows this. He absolutely does. Does he want to infuse praise on a guy that got here late? I guess that could be a theory that you go down. I just don't buy it. Look, I listened to the post-game press conference. I read the transcript again afterwards, just trying to see if there was something more to it than what I saw. And I just didn't. I just can't get there that a lot of people, I think, want to go to with what they saw and what they were hearing from Kirk Ferentz after the game. A couple other things that come out after the game I thought were interesting and talking about kind of going forward. That first drive of the second half. So Iowa takes the lead into halftime. It's 14-3, and they come right out, finish with that Caleb Johnson touchdown. It just was a thing of beauty. And running the ball, but to do this against Wisconsin, to do this against the team that has been your biggest foe in the Big Ten West throughout the 12 years that we got the Big Ten West. The team that at times I was trying to emulate. I was trying to get to their level. Now 3 of the last 4 have gone Iowa's way. You look at that program, it's kind of a rudderless operation at this point in time. What are they? What are they going to be? In fact, we're going to talk about that and connect it to Iowa here in just a little bit. Iowa is now the leading rushing team in the Big Ten. You know the last time that happened? Go back to 1997. Caleb Johnson having this monster season. You equate it to Sean Green. Sean Green ran for 1,850 yards, 20 touchdowns. Caleb Johnson's already got 19 touchdowns this year. I mean, that's what we're talking about. That's the kind of season that he's putting up. It's just absolutely remarkable. Nearly 1,300 yards, averaging 7.5 yards per carry, 19 touchdowns on the ground. He's got another one through the air and a receiving touchdown, also 19 grabs. That's more than we saw from Sean Green that season. Caleb Johnson is the best NFL prototype that they've had at the running back position in a long time. In fact, the only guy that I can equate at the same level. Remember, Sean Green was a third-round pick. And he didn't have probably the speed that is necessary to be a high-level running back, and he was a good, solid running back in the NFL. But the guy over my shoulder, Jamel Lewis, game worn Alamo Bowl jersey, he had it before the injuries. Fred Russell, little guy, right, and didn't have great speed, even for a guy like him. We've seen good running backs come through. We see guys like Tyler Goodson right now doing some work in the NFL. But the combination, the size, the speed, the power that Caleb Johnson has, the ability now not just to be that north-south guy, but stick his foot in the ground, make a cut, and then power through when a tackle comes and take that 2-yard gain and make it a 4-yard gain. Those are the things we didn't see early in his career, and they're coming. And he's going to have, obviously, a decision to make after the season. We have one more game left with him in Kinnick Stadium. That's it. It'll be the Black Friday game. Road trip to UCLA this week, bye week at Maryland before the finale against the Huskers. There'll be one more chance to see him in Kinnick Stadium. That's it. And likely that'll be the last time we'll see him in an Iowa uniform. We know what bowl games have turned into. Well, they've always been exhibitions, but they were exhibitions that everybody stuck around and played. That's not the case anymore. You couple it with being a running back. And Sean Green, going back to that 2008 season, he announced it on the field after the Outback Bowl that he was going to be departing after Iowa dismantled South Carolina in that football game. Well, we could be looking at something very similar. In fact, don't be surprised if we see a return to Tampa for this Iowa football team, maybe a rematch against South Carolina in that one. But it'll likely be without Caleb Johnson. Enjoy what we have, what we see, and there's a reason that I never completely abandoned ship with Caleb Johnson because the talent has always been there. We saw it early in his career. We saw it outside of the injuries a year ago at times, and now he's put it all together in his junior campaign. Mention Wisconsin, and I think it's a little be careful what you wish for. So many people want to see Kirk Ferentz retire, are ready for him to move on. They're ready for the next era of Iowa football. However, you look to our Northeast, maybe a new era is not a great thing. We'll talk about that as we continue. Be careful what you wish for. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers, you can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Have that information in front of you, seeing if your eyes match up with what's actually happening in the football game. It goes a long way in FanDuel, not hiding that information for you. Love that part about it. Just visit FanDuel.com today to get started. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel.com is where you go. Again, FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook of the NFL. Trent kind of back with you one final time as we take a look back at Iowa's dominating win against Wisconsin, 42-10. 3 games now over 40 points against Big Ten foes in Kinnick Stadium. That's something unheard of recently from Iowa football. Back-to-back dominating performances, 3 out of the last 4. You're feeling great about this team. Now, the turnaround is a quick one. I am happy that Iowa goes through this every year with a Black Friday game against Nebraska, and at least they have a plan in place. It does sound like, the team's not going to go over earlier. Sometimes you'll see that with these midweek games, but they're going to leave Thursday afternoon, it sounds like, get there, go through a walkthrough on Thursday, and of course play the game on Friday. So that will be similar to what they normally do, as opposed to with a quick trip to Lincoln. This one's going to be much longer, out to LA. Know a lot of Hawkeye fans are heading out there. Try to make it happen myself, not going to be able to. So I guess that just means that we're going to have to make our way to the Coliseum next year and watch that one. That aside, though, I want to talk about something that we saw. And after the game, Luke Fickell, the the Wisconsin coach, he had some things to say, including this. Quote, "This was kind of your worst nightmare, to be overtaken, manhandled, and dominated, especially in the second half." Yeah, and that's what it was. 2 years ago, Wisconsin moved on. Paul Chryst was not delivering at the level that Wisconsin fans thought they were. They had a system that had worked for 30 years, a system that had led them to Rose Bowls, to Rose Bowl victories, to Big Ten championships. And they had a system that was continuing. They were just waiting for the quarterback. And Graham Mertz, at least the early returns outside of his opener against Illinois on a Friday night, were not good. You saw him, though, at Florida. He'd improved immensely. They were a quarterback short, and that's what it was. They were never able to get there, to get that high-level guy outside of the 1 year of Russell Wilson. They never had that complete difference maker at the quarterback position. But they were still a good program that was winning and winning and winning. And we have something similar happening here. Luke Fickell, most everybody believed, was a home run hire. But instead of marrying his philosophy with what Wisconsin's done for 3 decades, he went different. And he brings in Phil Longo to run the air raid offense, and it's been hideous. You have to know who you are. And I think this is something for Iowa football fans to realize. Do you want to see an uptick of the program? Of course, we all do. But there's also something to say about the way the hierarchy goes in college football. And it's incredibly difficult to break through what at times feels like a glass ceiling for your football program. Sometimes that level, it's almost impossible. That there just isn't a way to really be able to break through. Wisconsin, I think, is learning that right now. You have to stay with your identity. And Iowa, whenever Kirk Ferentz retires, also has to realize that. Like, the reality of going out and bringing in some wide open offense that's going to completely revolutionize the way that we think of Iowa football, it's unlikely. What can you get in Iowa? You can get offensive linemen. You usually find some running backs. You're not going to find a whole lot of wide receivers. You get tight ends. That's where you're built. You're built to be a physical team. You're not going to be able to beat Ohio State and Michigan and Notre Dame and now USC and Washington and Oregon for high-level, talented skill position players. It's not going to happen. NIL has changed the game. You couple of it with what you are, you have to understand your identity. I think there's too many people out there that want Iowa to blow its identity up. It's not going to work. It won't. we see with some tweaks, with some changes, with an actual offensive philosophy, what this team can be with the running game now. Yes, it takes a talented running back, and that's what they have in Caleb Johnson. But they're doing it without much of a semblance of a passing game, and they're putting up these totals against Big Ten teams. We're not talking about a non-conference joke of a schedule. That's not what this is. They're doing it week in and week out against your brethren. This is what Iowa has to be. This is the way Iowa needs to be built in order to compete in today's environment. They have to do it their way, because another way is not going to work. And Wisconsin, I think, is finding that out themselves right now. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Appreciate each and every one of you being with us as we take a look back at the weekend that was, and a big victory over Wisconsin 42-10. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen today. For your second listen, make sure you checked out the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Craig Sheeman puts the Big Ten first when everyone else is overlooking it and talking about the SEC. Find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be back with you a bunch this week. We got the opener for the men's basketball team coming up on Monday evening against Texas A&M Commerce. Not the Aggies coming in for that one. We'll be back with you, though, with an instant reaction. Looking forward to seeing this Iowa men's basketball team. Got to watch them in the exhibition game against Minnesota Duluth. Look like a lot of the same. Are we going to see some changes? How about some of the new faces? We'll get into that with an instant reaction coming in your feed late on Monday night. Thanks for being with us as always. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Until then, go Hawks.